My name is Lakin Hager, and this is a presentation of the 1919 World Series, the World Series that forever changed baseball. So, this series featured the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. The White Sox were heavy favorites. They'd been one of the best teams all year. They had the best record. Everyone expected them to win. The series began on October 1st, 1919, and ended October 9th, 1919. The games were held at Cincinnati's then Redland Field and Chicago's Comiskey Park. So this series was best of 9 games, and as you can see, the Reds took a commanding lead after 5 games, a 4-game-to-1 lead. Then Chicago decided to fight a little bit and came back and won games 6 and 7, but the Reds eventually went on to win their first championship in Game 8. So, what happened? Why is this such a big deal in sport history? Well, it's considered the most scandalous event in baseball. It's said that the games were fixed, which it's an unprecedented proposition. No one believed that this was possible, that someone could think of fixing a World Series. Well, it's believed that this all started a few weeks before the actual World Series when White Sox first baseman Chick Gandil met with gambler Joseph Sport Sullivan. They met to discuss the White Sox potentially throwing the World Series in exchange for money. So Gandil got together a few co-conspirators and they agreed to throw the series in exchange for $100,000. As we can see from earlier, the Reds took a 4-1 game lead and it looked like everything was good to go. But it was after Game 5 that the White Sox conspirators decided that they would call off the fix and decided that they would play for the championship. That's because the terms were set that for every game that the White Sox lost, the conspirators would receive $20,000 installments. So they were to lose the 5 games, they would receive their $100,000. But the gangsters and gamblers weren't really cooperating and weren't paying the White Sox how they said they would. So the White Sox decided that they would play. But when you're in a deal with gamblers and gangsters, you can't really make the decisions, so the gamblers and gangsters began to threaten the players' families. So the players had no choice but to play out the series and um, agree to the fix and lost the World Series. So who all was involved? There was a bunch of White Sox players. Gandil, obviously, Sitkot, Williams, Riceburg, Felsch. McMullen was cut in after he overheard the deal. He initially wasn't part of it. And Chulish Joe Jackson is the biggest question mark here. There's still debate as to how much he was actually involved. It was said that he was supposedly paid $5,000 for whatever part he played, but there's still questions as to whether he was actually involved or how big of a part he may have played. And then Buck Weaver, he was initially in on the conspiracy, but pulled out and decided, no, I'm not going to do this. So, gamblers and gangsters, there was multiple, but these are just a few. The biggest name here is Arnold Rothstein. He was a big New York mob boss, and it's believed he played a major role in the whole conspiracy, but it was never actually proven. It's said that he could have received around $350,000, but again, his involvement was never proven despite the belief that he was a key piece in this whole conspiracy. The aftermath, the results, obviously the Cincinnati Reds won the series 5-3, and in the months that followed, there were still rumors. Did Chicago throw the series? Could they actually do that? Like, it just blew people's minds, and sports writers, fans, people in baseball continued to pursue the questions and continued to wonder what could have happened or what actually happened. And a grand jury was convened to investigate these rumors, and this happened because evidence came up that a regular season game featuring the Phillies and the Cubs was actually fixed. So the potential that an entire World Series was fixed was an even bigger deal. Slowly, players began to come out and testify and admit to their roles. Sitkot was the first. He testified saying he didn't really know why he did it, but he did it for the money to help his family. Then Chulish Joe Jackson came forward, and there's still question as to whether he was really involved. He said that he was told he'd be paid $5,000, but there's still a debate about his involvement. And then Lefty Williams and Oscar Felsch and all the others slowly began to come forward. So the players made their confessions, but then all of a sudden their confessions disappeared. No one really knows what happened. It's speculated that maybe White Sox manager Kaminsky took the confessions and hid them or something. No one really knows, but the confessions disappeared and the players were vindicated because of this, and all of their criminal charges were erased. They were initially convicted of 9 counts of conspiracy, but these charges were dropped after the confessions disappeared. But Judge Landis, who had become the baseball commissioner, wouldn't let it go, and he banned all 8 players, saying that they could never step on a major league diamond again and they would never play again. After this, many contradictory stories came forward. Players changed their stories. There was the debate about what actually happened, how much everyone was involved, and there was just still contradiction and arguments about it. But this did lay the foundation for Major League Baseball. It helped to establish better rules and a better way to regulate players and the play of the game, and it eventually led to Major League Baseball. So, the impact on baseball. Obviously, this was huge. It's considered the most scandalous event in baseball history because it did such a damage to baseball's image. During a time that baseball was really needed in America, America was in a post-war depression. There was public disillusionment. There were racial tensions. People needed that escape because baseball was cheap. It was cheap enjoyment. People could go and relax and watch a game. But this whole conspiracy really hurt baseball's image and how it was viewed. And it's still discussed today in hushed voices because it's such a big deal and it really hurt baseball and how people saw baseball. Obviously, there's still controversy over what really happened. There's still talk about who was involved and what went down. But the players were eventually cleared of criminal charges, but Landis would never reinstate them, basically saying that anybody who could do this should never be allowed to play baseball again, and they weren't. And this also hurt baseball because a lot of great players were banned. Some of the players who were banned were going to be Hall of Famers. They had that caliber. And the biggest impact was Shoeless Joe Jackson. He was extremely popular during this time, near the end of like a Babe Ruth era. Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of the most popular players in America. He was a great player, had a career batting average of .356, which I believe is the 3rd highest ever or something like that. Either way, he was a major player and everyone loved him, but this really hurt Major League Baseball because he would never be allowed to play again. He was one of the highlights of that 1919 World Series. He set a major league record with 12 hits, and he was the series best batter with .375 batting average. And it's really speculated, someone with those numbers, how much could they be involved with throwing a series like this? It's said that Shoeless Joe Jackson actually asked the manager not to play so that people couldn't say he was involved in it. And it said that he was initially involved, but maybe he changed his mind. But no one really knows how much he actually played an impact on throwing the series. But really, someone with those numbers, it's hard to argue that he played a major role. No one really knows, and we will probably never know how big of an impact he actually had. But either way, this whole controversy really hurt baseball's image for a really long time. But in a way, it did help it because it did set that foundation for Major League Baseball, and it set the foundation for baseball to be more regulated and there'd be better rules implemented that would hopefully prevent anything like this from happening again and to cut out gambling in baseball. It's sad that this happened, but this is a major piece of baseball history and really American sport history in general. And it's really cool to see how even something this bad helped lead to something as great as Major League Baseball is today, and it really shaped it and made it what it is today.